a bad knack for, I love to talk. I'll take every minute you have.
Okay. Okay, so we're ready to start. Everybody's on. I have here for session number 3, or workshop 3, is social media, language, and culture. And we have 2 speakers lined up for you. Our first speaker is Simon Bird, and he's going to be talking about his online Cree language learning. And our second speaker is Stephanie Pinasco, and she's also talking about social media promoting language revitalization. So for our first speaker, Mr. Simon Bird, he's a father of 2 and a husband of 22 years to Naomi Bird of the Thunderchild First Nation. Simon is a Rock Cree member of the Peter Baltine Cree Nation, a language advocate and a fluent speaker of the Y, TH, and N dialects of Cree. Simon is also a learner of the L dialect and Anishinaabemowin. Simon has a background in education as a teacher, principal, and education director. He is currently working in First Nations policy development with the AFN and is pursuing his PhD in Indigenous language revitalization at the UVIC. In his spare time, he is a content creator, sharing ways to engage learners using social media. So you can always check out his Facebook group with the other 25,000 plus members on Cree Simon Says. So really, it is a pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Simon Bird. Go ahead, Simon.
Thank you, Kathy. Again, good afternoon. Unless you're from BC, you're about to hit 12 o'clock. So folks around the table, I am going to share a presentation here, but if for some reason you get cut off, the primary focus of my presentation is engagement. And any type of engagement is worth its weight in any setting, especially when we deal with young people. And unfortunately, in this day and age, a lot of those young people never got a chance to connect in any meaningful way with their loved ones, as most of those people that tend to be consistent members connecting through social media are either residential school survivors. They have been 60 Scoop survivors, folks that have been, displaced and having no connection to their homelands or anybody of a fluent speaking background. So we have more and more of those people, and the ideal platform could be any one of those that we often see, TikTok, Instagram, and of course Facebook, amongst Twitter and everything else. But one of the reasons why I focus on Facebook, and by the way, if you are on Facebook, that is basically a hidden group. It's not public. There's no share button. And I'll explain that afterwards. But for the most part, I just focusing on Facebook since 2015. And I've tried Twitter for a while. I've tried Instagram for a while. I've tried YouTube for a little bit. You can still find some of those YouTube videos that I've made, and TikTok. But I found that those platforms weren't going as deep as I had hoped. And because my engagement hopes to ignite conversation amongst other people. And that's one of the things that I do find on Facebook, is that as long as you can keep the group following some type of respectful, you know, I'm just going to call it a classroom. I think that's where you can maximize that spark to engage amongst people themselves. So what I'm doing is I basically present in a small way, something that sparks interest, or a fun fact, or engages some feedback from members. And taking a look at my demographic, that is where a lot of older people, I'm going to say, tend to hang out. And I do things a bit on the selfish side, is because I know a lot of elders that are on Facebook, and they actually do connect via Facebook. And so they teach me as much as I try to teach and share. So with that said, I'm going to share my PowerPoint presentation here and just go accordingly. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and ask me, but I'll be sure to leave some space here before our 45 minutes is done. So right now I have 3:03. And a bit more in terms of what our focus is going to be is social media an effective tool for Indigenous language revitalization? What are the limitations of utilizing social media when it comes to teaching Indigenous languages as a means of promoting ILR? What precautions should be taken when using social media for Indigenous language revitalization? A little bit more by way of introduction. Won't focus too much on that. Kathy did a wonderful job in terms of the introduction. But I do want to emphasize self-location and where I come from. This is what I would still see today visiting back home, hanging out with my dad, and of course, a lot of my relatives. This is ice fishing, of course, making some tea. And by the way, there is nothing quite as good as campfire tea for many of you that have tried it. And on the land, you don't necessarily need to be bringing everything. One of the awesome things that I love to present is a lot of those traditions that we once carried, living off the land, we still do today. And the black and white picture you see here is how my dad grew up in his time. Our community that started, you know, the first generation that started to come off the land. This is what the settlement looked like. And I point to the diagram in the middle because I often like to point out that I come from a land of 6 seasons, and the ice is very, very important to our people. Anybody in the north knows that you can still go on the ice between winter and spring. And also, you know, the ice has a major impact in the way people travel between fall and winter. This is Nuhtawi Nipapa. This is my dad. This is my father. And he is just demonstrating for the folks on social media how we would hunt traditionally. We didn't need a bag to hold a lot of what you would find delicacies within a moose that you killed. You can see on the rock here, if you can see my cursor, you can see 2 kidneys, and he had already put in the heart. And this is what we spend a lot of money when we go to eat, what do you call that? When you go to a Chinese food restaurant and everything comes in little pots. Anybody put that on the chat? I do forget. Anyways, I love eating tripe as one of those delicacies in a Chinese food restaurant. And that is the same stuff that our people ate. And this would be on the right picture here is something that you would compare to calamari in the way you cook it. Of course, these are the insides of whitefish. And in the fall time, a lot of what we have is basically comes out at certain times of the year, and is the whitefish are spawning, the moose are calling, and a lot of how we cook out in the bush is over the open fire. I'm just gonna dim sum. Thank you very much, Francis and Minot. I knew somebody would know exactly what I was talking about. So every time I try to, I try to present, I try to make it relatable. You know, that's about connecting to something we already know and introducing it in a way where it doesn't, you know, doesn't feel like work as we're learning. And that's basically all I do on social media is present an idea, make it relatable, and hopefully it connects. And here are some other pictures that you would often find on the fish camp. This is myself, and this is my dad. And this is how I grew up. Every summer, I'm out on the lake from the break of dawn to basically in the evening, commercial fishing, and then having to listen to the language all day, every day. And of course, in the downtime, when we did have some, we basically go check out some of the spots that we would track moose. And this are the type of fish that I was talking about, atigamig, which is whitefish. And in Anishinaabemowin, we would essentially say the same thing with atigamig. And of course, in Cree, we would say atigamig. And so, of course, this is Nigawi. This is my mom. This is my mother. Agawan is what you would call this setup right here. And essentially, that's what we use for cooking. And that's what people refer to when they say home fire. And one of the things that many communities do is they take kids out on the land. Of course, this is collecting medicines. And for those of you that might recognize what's up there, it may look like weegeese, what we call in our language, which is rat root or bitter root or muskrat root. But that is actually fairly large. And that is what looks almost like a pineapple. And this is waskatamo. And this is what a lot of beavers, they eat. This is prepared in the same way as you would do with rat root or muskrat root. And basically it has, these are called rhizomes, and they have a lot of medicinal power. Medicinal properties that were traditionally prepared when you combine with other plants and other medicines. And the basic idea, again, in a lot of our communities is if you introduce some of these basic experiences, some of these experiences to kids, it will, plant the seed. And it starts to strengthen that identity that they had with their grandparents. Many of these kids I'm related to in our community, so I can talk about them. I can tell you in my own experience that a lot of kids that don't sit too well in a classroom, that are maybe seen or maybe labeled behavioral, do fare a lot better when it comes to experiences like this outside of the classroom. But essentially, you're planting a seed. A lot of kids, it is assumed today that kids have this experience back home, but you would be very surprised how many students live right by a lake and have never went on a boat ride. Because gas is expensive, boats and motors have to be owned or inherited by family members. And so providing these small seeds of interest and these connections to young generations today does take hold deeper roots as these kids grow to be older. So essentially, that's what the goal of social media is from my perspective. And this is what I want to share, the do's and don'ts and maybe the ugly parts of social media. And by way of self-location, in case you didn't know where South End of Reindeer Lake is, here you have a map without any borders besides what we have there in terms of the US-Canada border. And I love showing this map, and I encourage any teachers, anybody working with students, or maybe even talking about their background as to where they're from, to use a map similar to what we see here before the borders, so we can see how we were connected. And you can see that this Churchill River system that goes into the Hudson's Bay and into the Rockies is significant, because that is how our people were connected. We were connected from the east to the west. If you take a look at the road maps today, you would assume, young people assume today, that we don't have much in common with our neighbors to the province to the left of us, or to the provinces to the right of us. This is part of decolonizing our minds to help young people see that, listen, there's a reason why we speak the same dialect or the same language with the people upriver or downstream. This is my absolute favorite teacher, my late grandmother. She was the first one to really take time to answer many of the questions that I've had growing up as a little boy. This is how I will always remember her. She did pass away just before the pandemic and into her mid-80s. And so she basically grew up on the land, and her children were the first ones to live in the community, because the federal government deemed a lot of our northern people that were of mixed ancestry non-status. And basically a lot of our northern people, well, I wouldn't say a lot, I would say some of our northern people were basically left not to be going into residential schools, and by the convenience of some stroke of the pen, deemed some of our northerners non-status. And then my grandmother lived at a time where she lived in a winter camp and at a summer camp. This is very important to point out, because I want folks to remember that the reservation system, was basically introduced not that long ago, and the impacts of folks being segregated and forced to go into small pockets of land instead of traditionally going upstream and downstream, visiting family, reinforcing that connection, has a major way of how we see the language today and how we relate to other people. This, I can safely say, was the traditional territory of a lot of our families. I'm not saying that this was all Cree territory, or this was all Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation. This, was, we come from caribou hunting people, and we'd be hunting on the north end of Reindeer Lake, and we'd have family that settled out on the north end of Reindeer Lake, and I've extended to the west, and also have extended families to the west, to the west, and to the east, and to the south, and to the north. So this is also very important. I point this out because when you ask a person where they're from, it becomes very complicated when they acknowledge that they have one or two communities, or maybe even three communities that their family comes from, or their traditional territories. Because if you use my grandmother as an example in terms of where she came from, she couldn't tell you she was from South End because that's where she lived well into her adulthood. But the land that she identifies and the trap line that she identifies in terms of where she's from, that's the answer that you would be given. But you have to wait. You have to be patient in terms of how much time you're willing to spend on a person's answer when you ask them, where are you from? Conveniently, we want people to just give us one place, one town, and that sometimes is a very unfair question for a lot of our older generations. One of the things that I mentioned is this concept of a river in terms of where folks are from. And the first thing that my grandmother shared with me was that living through our traditional highways and being connected by the waterways enabled us to have a very tolerant way of thinking, a very tolerant way of accepting other ways of knowing and other people's differences. My grandmother in her late age, actually, her entire life was one of the most open-minded, tolerant people I have ever met. And I've noticed that the generations that were in my community, despite having to speak the language, had this very, almost this closed-mindedness. And that's one of the things that I think is very important to note when we think about what colonization has done to our people, what being segregated into reservations has done to our mentality and our language. And here we have, of course, basically a previous river system, and this analogy has these small pools of water that are now segregated reservations or First Nations communities. And what happens to water when it doesn't flow from one direction or it doesn't replenish itself year after year through the spring melt and into throughout the year, is the water becomes stagnant. And what is born out of the stagnant water, of course, are a lot of what we don't want is flies, mosquitoes, and pests. I use this analogy in almost every one of my presentations because that's what happens to our way of thinking. This is very important to point out to folks that have young people assuming that our language is archaic, obsolete, and a thing of the past. If you were to carefully examine the language, I would say every Indigenous language that I have got to know so far points to the same teachings, that words have such deep meaning and they guide us how to have our natural compass or walk in a direction that our words are reminding us to how to treat other people, how we are related to other people, how we are connected. It's that disconnection that happens when people don't speak our language, have been punished for speaking our languages, or don't pay attention to the words that we speak. So I am a big fan of etymology. And thank you, Lucy, for pointing that out in our previous map there. Lots of Dene, Cree, Métis ancestry, definitely. And I also want to use that comment there, Lucy, to basically state that at one time it was not uncommon for our people to speak more than one Indigenous language. They spoke many dialects and also spoke the language of their neighboring allies or relatives. And so that history of disconnection, I'm not going to go too deep in terms of how colonization has impacted us, but I do provide some common examples: industrial schools, residential schools, reservation systems controlled by the Indian Act, the banning of ceremonial practices, the banning of cultural stories, loss of language, the loss of identity, and the loss of confidence and a sense of place and belonging, which gives people power. And so these pictures are from the Whitehorse, Yukon, and I love this quote in their cultural center, which basically identifies that our relationship to the river and the land was changing. So we found new ways to make our living. And I extend that quote to finding new ways of connecting. And right behind the Culture Center, if you live around the area, you'll recognize this transformer box there. Not sure exactly what it's called, but one of the things that I found very interesting when I went to the First Nations Yukon Education organization there was the spray painting. The graffiti on here is what I see as a thunderbird. It's very clearly a thunderbird, but it was quite something not to see everything else that you would normally see spray painted in many different communities, but to actually see spray painted that sense of identity from whoever took the time to paint that up. So I also, again, just want to remind everybody that at one time they had many elders upon whom to depend, but with a short period of time, they witnessed elders fluent and Halkamelum pass away one by one. Of course, this is a quote from 2012 by Gardner, one of the readings that I've had. And as a result, our recent census, of course, points out the shrinking number of and decline of mother tongue speakers. So again, despite not having as many mother tongue speakers, there comes a reaction. I'm going to say that we need to have as many connections to our language as possible. Just thought I'd point that out. And another one of those lack of connections or displacement realities that we have is that in Canada, it is estimated that more than 50% of Indigenous people now live in cities. And I live in a city. I live downtown in Ottawa, and I definitely feel disconnected. When I do connect on social media, I feel that there is a sense of community back home to a lot of people, especially when folks are wanting to connect about the language. And so that is one of the pros for social media. Just going to check the comments here. Definitely, Bill, a loss of humor. A lot of what we definitely found when elders would talk in the language is a lot more laughing. Like they say, you know, everything is funnier in the language. So again, going back to some of the major questions, a little bit of a review there in case you've joined late. On social media and language revitalization, a little bit of the backstory here is, of course, my name is Simon, and I wanted to take a sense of ownership because every time anybody says anything about the language, there's a difference of understanding, maybe different spelling, different dialects. A lot of people disagree that it shouldn't be Cree altogether. So I'm using this as an example of sometimes the ownership that we have to accept for what we post on social media. So again, Pre-Simon and a play on, of course, Simon Says, was a way for me to say, this is what I'm going to teach. It's not everything entirely what everybody says, but I'm going to show you some of the basics. And if anybody says anything, you have somebody to blame. And I take that responsibility very seriously. And a lot of folks tend to take a look at this dynamic or this relationship that I'm somewhat of a teacher. Some folks have reached out and said, I don't have anybody. So they've kind of called me uncle. I don't want to damper on anybody's connection or wanting to connect that way. So I begrudgingly accept that role as maybe an adopted maybe language teacher. So again, some folks may not realize this, but teasing someone, trying to speak the language will do just, yes, Keisha, Uncle Simon. that has happened, yes. So anyways, teasing someone just trying to speak the language causes just as much damage as what the government try to do, or what the church try to do, or what schools try to do. And so I always try to point that out as an example that, hey, listen, they're trying. That might be the last connection that they have, or the last interest that they have to try and speak the language. The last thing you should do is try to cut them down. But I also want to just mention, if you are a language learner, some of that responsibility lies on yourself. You have to ask questions. You have to learn that sometimes you may misspell something, but you have to find trusted teachers out there. You have to find trusted uncles and trusted aunties to make sure that if they correct you, that you will not necessarily take things a bit on the personal side. And again, until the advent of the internet, Indigenous people did not have the opportunity to come across their language in a foreign land or in digital domain. I have members on social media all across Canada and actually around the world. So this is one of the great things. And a lot of people didn't realize how funny Indigenous people were until social media came along. Of course, before social media, every Indian that you saw on TV or in movies were stoic or very romanticized. And when social media came around, all of a sudden that humor started to show itself. Again, that's a double-edged sword. I don't post anything regarding blasting social media or trying to perpetuate negative stereotypes, but that definitely, you have seen that, and I stay away from that, because I think humor can be portrayed in a healthy way and not perpetuate any stereotypes, in case there are people in the group that may not know that, hey, that's not okay for you to repeat that, although it might be funny in some circles in behind closed doors. So I try not to put fuel to the fire. Essentially, this is your basic recipe of what I'm doing. I do not emphasize grammar. I emphasize communication, context as much as possible, which is, of all the platforms that I've mentioned, that ability to provide context. I strongly feel that Facebook is one of the most effective platforms to provide that context, because it goes, it creates dialogue. You can insert some more thoughts in case some folks are asking questions. Processing content of high interest to the learner. That is one of the downsides in having to utilize social media, is you have to keep things fairly engaging or interesting. Folks will vote with their feet. You can have a really nice page, but if it smells like work, if it tastes like work, it is work. So you want to do some seamless learning as much as possible. And it's okay not to solve everything that you want using social media, but at the same time, you're generating enough interest for folks to ask questions. Adjusting the pace of instruction to the students. That's what I do. I do a lot of what do you call that? When you multiple choice, because knowing full well that I have folks that are completely fluent, much smarter than I am, and folks on the other end of that spectrum that know nothing, absolutely nothing about the language and starting from scratch. I know that full well with some of the posts that I do. Always keep that in top of mind. And then always try to keep it on the basic side. I do what I call the Kiam style approach. I don't worry about spelling. I don't worry too much about anything else. I just want you to feel comfortable to maybe answer some of the questions. If you can feel comfortable in engaging and writing something down that maybe your grandfather, grandmother, or somebody that spoke to you in the language at one time, and if you're comfortable about spelling it out in any way you can, I think I've done my job. I think there are university classes. I think there are advanced classes. I think there's fantastic resources available out there to take you to the next step. And that Kiam is a word that means many things. And most times today, it can mean, who cares? I take it a lot further, a lot deeper. It is what it is. Let it be. It's okay. It's out of my hands. And that's what I try to promote when I do this engagement piece. And this is one of the regular banners that you would see. It comes back from time to time. Here's me, and there's, of course, somebody crying. There's wa, and then there's sin. Mi wa, sin is Y dialect. 4, it is good. All right, I have the 15-minute heads up here. All in all, Chris Lavin says initiative, you're making the process of learning easy and welcome. It is bite-sized, it's short, it's engaging, lessons to spark an interest in the language. It's consistent and fresh. You have to be consistent in everything you do. It's digestible, you're breaking down the language phonetically, and you can't come in and expect everybody to read SRO or syllabics, or even read some of the things that you write phonetically, because people read phonetics a bit differently. Seamless learning, can't smell, it can't taste, it can't look like work. Knowing my role is very limited. I'm only introducing, and that I think social media should be understood it's basically the tip of the iceberg. If you want to learn more, you have to start that process yourself. You can't learn everything on social media. You can't be going to ceremony and saying, oh, I'm doing this because I learned this on social media, or you can't perform a water ceremony because you've seen a YouTube video. You have to find your teacher, and you have to engage in your own path of learning. You have to take your learning deeper. Everything that you see on social media and YouTube is only supposed to be introductory. I'm going to skip, of course, again, connecting with learners. I do a lot of fun stuff like this to try and, again, get people to answer. And most of us can relate to Britney Spears here. When we forget a word or introduced to a new word, it feels like MTV Awards. And this is one of my favorite lessons, and it all goes back to what I'm talking about is you can take one word and you can start unpacking it, and the depth that we have in this particular indigenous word, in a Cree word is Esquesis, which literally means a little woman. Can you imagine if every girl that we saw as woman to be? And it reminded us of our healthy women in our circles, that they are to be treated with respect, like our moms and our aunties and our grandmothers. And the same thing goes for boys. Nappies is literally meaning man to be, or soon to be a man. All these words within our language has always directed us to be the best that we can be, in to stay in touch with our humanity. And of course, this is one of my most favorite teaching. This is the original here. This is a mnemonic, and this is standard Roman orthography, and this is how you spell it phonetically. Mayo Kisakau is a mnemonic. It's an easy way to remember a word. And how you spell it, standard Roman orthography, of course, is Mayo Gisigao. And Mayo Kisakau is phonetically, and of course, what is that? It is have a nice day. I always encourage people, if they're going to learn a language, use the system of writing that's being taught to you or you see in a resource book, but also write it in the way you hear it. All right, I think that's what I have. I'm going to go with a couple more slides here. And here we have again, Agameamo. Indigenous people in social media, definitely not the silver bullet that folks are asking for. It's not going to save your language, but it will help. If folks out there are hoping that an app will one day save or revitalize the language, it's not. It's the work that you put into it. And you got to remember that a tool is only beneficial if it is used. Otherwise, it turns out to be another something, just another flavor of the day. This young guy here dubs a lot of cartoons into Anishinaabemowin. Again, young people are amazing. Utilize them. Just because you don't understand a lot of technology today doesn't mean that you can't create something. Do some collaborating. I'm going to use this book as an example as what not to do. You don't want to introduce an idea and have it spawn a life of its own. This is a fantastic book. I have one copy here, and I find it very amazing. But of course, this and everything else context has to be provided. This went viral a while back, sometime last year. You know, my daughter brings home a Cree pocket book from school, and these are the pages I randomly opened. What the heck? She's only 10 years old in grade 5. Very offensive language, and I thought our Cree language did not have to teach kids or people to admit crime. So again, this is a pocket book for social workers, court workers, people that work with victim services, even police officers. So, you know, there's quite questionable words on here, but these are, again, vetted through. These exist in language. You know, we didn't only pick berries and make love. I think that's the quote that I heard from Reservation Dogs from last week's show. Big ass, Mr. Big ass, ugly one, smelly testicles, shitty bum. All those words exist in our language, but you can't be sharing a book like this for anybody and expect them to just say, not look at the bad words. It's going to take off on a life of its own, and everything that you share, you have to have some responsibility, which is why I encourage folks, if you're going to use social media, use it with a grain of salt and know that it's not going to resolve and provide all the answers that you want. 5 minutes left in our presentation. Who has some questions?
Nice presentation, Simon.
I love talking about language. I could talk and talk and talk. Dinige, there, Keisha. Bill, just solid. I see. What is the name of the book? That is Pocket Cree. Pocket Cree. All right. Not sure how this goes there, Dr. Kathy or Manal, but do I just wait for people to ask questions, or how does this go?
Well, we'll give them another minute to ask a question, and then if there's no questions, we'll go on to our next speaker.
Excellent. We just check out the.
It is a very good presentation that you've done now.
Thank you. Pocket Tree, a phrase book of nearly all occasions. The author is Kenneth Papanegas.
Okay, we have a question from Bill Shade. Bill?
Hi, Simon. Not necessarily a question, but a comment. We did start our own land-based initiative here, Stoney Education Authority, and you're 100% correct where students that don't do well in the classroom are definitely flourishing, on our outdoor classrooms, and we have definitely seen a rise in attendance. And we've also, I know some of the schools have also said they have students coming back to school that have not been in school for a few years and are particularly there for the land-based program. So you're bang on with that comment.
And thank you there, Bill. I know my colleague here, Bill, would often tell his story in education is that sports played a major role in his keeping in school. And that's all that I view as social media, is these little hooks to keep people engaged and interested in the same way sports does that in a lot of our schools, and land-based education is doing today for a lot of our kids, is because most often and too many times, a lot of what's waiting for our kids outside of schools is a very ugly reality. And I come from a community that has the same issues that many of our communities face in terms of addictions, suicide, homelessness. And so keeping our kids engaged in school programming is absolutely one of the most powerful things that we can do to give them at least a bit of hope and to help prepare them for what the possibilities may be waiting for them after graduation.
Okay, thank you, Simon. So with that, I'm going to go on and introduce our next speaker, which is Stephanie Tenasco. And Stephanie is an Algonquin from Kitigan-Zibi, Quebec. And she grew up in her community, and she had the opportunity to learn her language and culture. She's worked in various support roles within the field of Indigenous education, and most recently in language revitalization since 2018. Stephanie herself is a second language learner. Stephanie, I'm gonna introduce you to the group and you can take it away.
All right. So everybody can hear me well? Yeah, okay, good. Sorry, I have a bit of a cold, so I'll try to get through this. So, Kwe Kakina Migwash Kakina Gibija Egnongum, Stephanie Tenasco, Nindishnikas, Kitigan-Zibi, Quebec, Nindonjiba, Niminwendam Nongum, Kijianishna Bemoyan, Kakinaunje Kinawa, Eyedeweyi, Kanadang. So hello everybody, my name is Stephanie Tenasco. I'm from Kitigan-Zibi. I'm happy to be speaking today and talking about my language to all of you across Canada. So I'm going to be talking about the videos that I make for my community, and I put them on social media. So I work at the cultural center in my community, and I work in the language program. So my role is a multimedia technician, big fancy name for little small me. So the role that I do is to deliver the technical aspect of our language. So that's like graphic design, modernizing, and page layout, and just bringing language that was recorded a long time ago in the 70s by a few people who started to want to preserve our language. Now I'm working to get it out there in a new, unique way so that people can learn. And through COVID, I started doing videos because I was working from home. So my job is really to make like posters or games or activities in the language to help promote speaking. And whether it's flashcards, I made balloons that say Minoda Bishkam, happy birthday, where you can't buy this in any store. And how do I get people talking, or people asking, how do I say this or how do I say that? And just to let you guys know that I'm a second language learner, so I'm not fluent and I don't pretend to be. However, this position that I'm in now gave me that opportunity to be able to use my voice and speak. I did attend an immersion program for 1 year, and when I was, I think, like 12, and now I'm working in the language. So I've come a long way with my language learning as well. I'm also happy to be working with my mom, who is one of the the original group of people to preserve the language, and to show her how far language has come from the 70s when she had started. She began learning preserving language, and she had one pencil and a pad of paper. And now she's working alongside of me, learning to make apps, learning. So language is really at the touch of a button for her. And so starting from nothing to now, it's beyond her wild expectations. So part of my job is to create videos. And when I started, I didn't know what I was doing, or how to even go about it. So I started off at home, and all I used was my cell phone. And it was a beautiful day outside, and I have a beautiful porch. I sat outside, and animals started coming to my porch, and I said, okay. There was a deer that walked by, then a skunk. So I started taking videos, and I said, oh, I'll make this a language lesson. So one of my first lessons was just describe or talking about the animals and what they can do. So the videos that I started making were anywhere between 15 seconds and a minute long, something engaging and snappy to just to preserve the language and to get it out there for the students in the community, as well as people who are living off the community. So when I started making these videos, all I used was my phone. I have an iPhone, so I started using iMovie, which is just basically what's comes with your phone, and I started editing that way. Then I started getting better at it and a little smarter, and said, let's add some audio to this. So then I started speaking into them and doing voiceovers. So I do have a YouTube channel. I'll let you know the link to that later. But on there, you can see my progression when I first started to one of the last videos I made. It increasingly got better, and that's okay because I learned along with that. So in there, I just wanted to show and teach really just basic knowledge, everyday language, simple words and simple sentences that you can use every day, whether it's going to town, whether it's waking up. And because of COVID, everybody's in their homes. So I wanted to use more home language, more like get up, to brush your teeth, just super simple language. And when I started posting these, I just started posting them on my personal social media. And then it just kind of took off from there and just kind of snowballed. Um, and then people started messaging me saying, how do you say this? How do you say that? And then I said, okay. So I started writing these down because people, whatever people want to know is how the content of my videos is what people want to know. So then I started using that in my videos. So my videos range from like weather, or sometimes I'm singing, or a recipe. And it's not all in Anishinaabe, and it could be some in English and some in Anishinaabe. And it's just to get the gist of the language, and not to scare anybody away from learning the language. Just simple language like that. So I guess some of the videos that I've worked on, well, all of the videos basically that I worked on from now only have me in it, and my voice. But the goal is to, and I'm a very shy person, so I'm super shy speaking right now, but but not to be shy, and I'd like to incorporate the community. There is one video in there when I first started that I had my cousin come over. She dropped off her son actually, and I was babysitting him, and I was working. So I said, why don't I use him in one of my videos? So he's one of the voiceovers in my videos. And actually, I was creating flashcards. I don't know if you can see this. Some flashcards with just simple words, summer words, and these are some of the berries that we have here. And all I did was create a video with 4 different berries, and I had him put on my headphones, and I just recorded his voice. So all I did was I held it up and I said, Miskomin, Miskominug. And I had him repeat after me. I recorded him, and then I edited his voice into the videos. So then he was very proud, and everybody's very proud to be a part of something, right? And he was only 6 years old at the time, and he was super happy to hear his own voice. And he remembered these words and went home and told his mom that I put him on a video, which was fine. But I'd like to incorporate more of the community and have them use the language so that you can hear it, but you have to say it, you have to repeat it. It has to be something daily that you do every day. And that's why that's why I make these videos, is so that you can log on, because everybody nowadays does carry their phone around. So just at the touch of a button to be able to listen to it or play it in your car when you're driving, just so it's repetitive and that you hear it all the time. And they're basically geared towards beginners, because I'm a second language learner and I don't know everything, but I do my best to teach what I do know in the ways that I do know how. I also, everybody has gifts and talents, and I think one of my hidden things that I like to do was to make videos. So when I got this position, I'm like, yay, I get to make creative videos, and being creative with them is something that you have to do to catch the people's attention. So one of the other things that I do in my spare time is sing. And when I went to school, I was fortunate enough to learn some songs. And little did I know, or little did I think, that 35 years ago, aging myself there, 35 years ago, that I'd be here speaking in front of all of you today, talking about language and talking about that experience of learning these songs and putting them on video, recording them for the future generations to come. I never thought that far, but I'm super happy that I learned these songs, And so, yes, I do record them audio, and they do play on our radio station here in Kitigan ZB. And I did do recordings, and one of the videos that I like to do with the audio recordings that I did do of some of the songs, community songs, is claymation. My nieces like to do claymation, and that's just another trick, another way to get it out there, and is to have my songs, not songs that I personally made, but songs that were taught to me, and they, some of them they all have lessons in them, and some of them it's just to learn the language. But to have a claymation video go along with some of these songs. So yeah, so some of the tools that I use are iMovie, Perfect Video, which is an app that you can download. I also started with Adobe Premiere, which is a big program on a computer, and it's really scary to learn. So I prefer my phone. And I always look for tutorials online, YouTube and stuff like that. I found other apps, text art. So I'll use some sort of fun animation where the words will pop in and then I'll say the audio. Powtoon too is another video creation online that I use, which I like to use when I do some sort of recipes or something like that, because it's there for you. The less of the background and it's all there for you. You just kind of have to plug in and play, really. Like, it's just, you have to say the audio, record yourself, and type out what you want the audience to hear, and it's really fun and unique. And that's what you want to do to grasp the attention of your audience. And like, this is where we're headed. This is where we're in these days, is with iPads, with social, with phones, and there's not a kid that's under 10 years old who doesn't know how to open up a phone and want to touch the screen, and because they think everything's touch screen, and they never grew up in a world where there was none of that, none of these videos, none of these new media ways to learn. And so yeah, like, the content that I do is very simple. Yeah, I'm just looking around here. Some of the challenges was being creative, and just scrolling myself on social media, and then TikTok came about. So I said, okay, why not take some of these videos that I see people doing, and putting it into our own language. So one of the TikToks that I took from was, I don't remember the song, but it was just a country song. I forget what it was, and there was this dance that you do to the country song, and I just taught the word love. I love you. And then as I pointed up, I put the word love, and then in the dance, it goes 3 times to the side, and then I made the words pop up 3 times to the side, and I had to do a little dance in the video. Simple. It was like maybe 20 seconds. I was super shy, but I did it anyways, because you know what? I just want to get that language out there as much as I can. And little did I know, that video that I posted on social media took off. And so that gave me the courage to continue to do videos and to actually be the face of my videos. Some of the simple other videos that I do were just the super word of the day. And it was near Halloween when I thought of this. I had a costume of Supergirl, dressed up as Supergirl. And then I used super phrase of the week, sorry. And it was just a super phrase because you don't want to just hear it just once. You want to hear it often. So I played it every day on my social media, and people, something like uh on the God, you're doing a great job, or something like that, where it's just a positive reinforcement. And people were like, we already seen this video. I'm like, that's okay. I want it to be out there as much as possible, and for you to understand, and for you to learn, and for you to actually say it and know it after a while, where it becomes like second nature, and using it in an everyday, whether you're a teacher or not. All have kids, or you all have nieces and nephews, or even a coworker. You can say andagaj to them. You can say you're doing a great job, good job. It's just everyday simple language. So yeah, that's some of the challenges was being for me were how to be creative, learning to speak and not be shy, because most of the videos I'm in them, so I obviously have to speak and not be shy, and get rid of that feeling of being shy, and to speak my language, as well as getting other people involved so that they have a part of their language learning journey, I guess you can say, to get the community involvement, not only just kids, but adults as well, to get them involved in speaking. So I like to do recordings with the community members, or something like that. Another thing that we do for Christmas is we have a Santa phone in, and what I had done was contacted a guy in the community, and wrote a little script out for him, and recorded it so he could listen and he can practice it, and so that the kids can call in. It's a free telephone call, a free line that we have, that they can call in and hear a message from Santa in Anishinaabe, and they can leave a message. So it's just simple, fun ways of hearing the language. I know that's not a video, however, it's still listening to the language. And we had a lot of participation for that, because I could see who calls, where they call from, as well as how many times they call. So yeah, it's just to be creative with your videos, and yeah.
That's so great, Stephanie. You're putting your TikToks out, and you're using social media to do all that. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Stephanie? I think there's something in the chat. Oh, just at the great ideas. If you have any questions that you think of later, you could always put them in the chat, or contact us, and we'll send them forward to Stephanie.
So really, my language videos are just a stepping stone for anybody to use, and to use with their children, and for the language to be in their homes. So we try to get this out, or I try to get this out as much as possible, in any way that I can, and any tools that I can.
Yeah, and it's revitalizing the language one piece at a time. Like you say, the repetition is necessary, having it in the home is necessary. So you're doing a great job. Mano, did you want to add anything? Did you?
No. Are there any other questions? If not, we can do a little bit of housekeeping. That'll be it for today. I am going to put into the chat room the link for the FNEAA evaluation form. If we want everybody to come back tomorrow, and so we hope everybody is going to come back tomorrow, but we understand that if you can't come back tomorrow, we'd like to, nonetheless, FNEAA would like to hear from you. So I'm going to put in the link for the FNEAA National Gathering Evaluation Form. And if you can do that, give us your feedback. It's going to be greatly appreciated. Tomorrow, we're slated to start again at 9:50. We will open up the window a little bit earlier like we did today. So I encourage you all to come. If you've got some free time, please explore the sites, check out the sponsors that we have. Again, I will put my and Claire's address. If you have any technical issues getting in tomorrow, you can contact me or Claire Brockpay, and we'll walk you through it. Okay.
Lindsay has a question, Manoj?
Okay.
Hi. Yes, Lindsay from the Yukon. Stephanie, I love all of your ideas. I really I'm a very shy second language learner as well. And creating videos might put me out of my comfort zone, but I really feel like I should get there. I did want to let you know that in the Yukon, we have a few very fascinating language learners and speakers. And one of them, his name's Kashaw, Stephen Reed, and he does almost like a smoke signals sitting at the roadside. I don't know if you've seen that before, but just looking at some of the Yukon stuff, he talks in the language of who he sees and what he sees, and just tries to make really wonderful phrases of the day like you were talking about, and phrases of the week, and it really kind of makes the humor come back into our language and stuff like that. So I really hold my hands up to you and Shonithan for all of your hard work, and hopefully one of these days I'll have enough gusto to do it myself.
Miigwech.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. Any final questions? Comments? Nope. So I guess we'll leave it at that, and we will see you all bright and early tomorrow for our day 2 of the session. So have a nice evening, and thanks again, Stephanie. Wonderful job.
Miigwech.